Hi, this is Ben Schwellen. Today I'm talking to you about the Germanic languages. Which one should you learn? Hey, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. In this video, I'm covering the West Germanic languages, like German, Dutch, Afrikaans. We're already speaking English, so I don't really go into that. Germanic languages split into two different parts. And in the next video, which I'll put here when I'm done with that, I will cover the North Germanic languages in Scandinavia and across in Iceland. So how this video is going to work is I'm going to take you through and show you a bit that's interesting about each of the cultures. And one by one, I'll do that first, and then I'll show you a small, tiny bit about the grammar that makes that language really interesting. But I'm not going to dwell on that because frankly, if you want to learn the grammar and if you really want to learn a language, just go do it yourself because that's the best way and only way you're ever going to learn a language. You just have to get into it and do it and get into the grammar and really find it interesting. To start with, I'm not going into these smaller Germanic languages like Frisk or Frisian, the Faroese language, or some of the smaller ones on some of the islands, or Scots in Scotland. I'm not talking about these languages. I'm talking about the bigger Germanic languages. Here are the Germanic languages you can see on this map here, where they come from. They come from southern Scandinavia originally and spread south into Germany and present-day Netherlands. And that's important later on when we get to the consonant shift and how these languages changed and what became unique about all of them in relation to each other. These Germanic languages are on a spectrum between analytic or less inflection of verbs and nouns and less complicated grammar in terms of attaching things on, to a full-on case system which inflects pretty much everything, like Icelandic. And you can see here that English is over here with Afrikaans and Dutch just after that, and that German and Icelandic are farther over. And it's good to know where along this complexity spectrum, not really complexity, but just how the language works in terms of changing nouns and verbs. Each of these languages are, because they are on a spectrum. Just be aware of that. When you're looking at Germanic languages, they're on a spectrum, with Icelandic at one end and Afrikaans or English at the other. And I put West Germanic here underneath and North Germanic above, so you can see where those two fit for both of these two videos that I'm making. So let's look at these languages. Dutch is the third most spoken Germanic language. We're talking between 25 and 30 million people. And it's not just spoken in the Netherlands. It's spoken in Belgium, and it's spoken in Suriname in South America. If you don't really want cold weather, Dutch and Afrikaans are the best ones to learn because you can escape the winter and speak the language. So you've got that, and a few islands in the Caribbean as well speak Dutch, like Aruba. And this is really cool because I don't really like cold weather, so I'm interested in Dutch. Like English, Dutch has not undergone the high German consonantal shift, which means that you're going to find loads and loads of words which are practically exactly the same between Dutch and English. It's going to become really familiar to you as you even just look on a newspaper in Dutch or hear people speaking the language. It's really close. If you're not wanting to go into a language that's going to take a long time to learn, Dutch is a really good one. And the culture opens you up. All languages are gateways to other cultures. So this culture opens you up to Afrikaans. It opens you up to German in the long run because 20 to 30% of words in Dutch come from German. But like English, and these two, Dutch and English, are a bit different to the other Germanic languages in this case. It has absorbed a lot of French words and a few more Latin words. And so you have what happens in English, you have a register. So people will say the Dutch Germanic word for one thing, but if they want to sound a bit more posh, they'll use the French or Latin word for the same thing. So you have a lot of vocabulary because of this fusing of multiple languages in Dutch. And most people who speak Dutch, or who are from the Netherlands at least, learn 4 languages at school. So when you're speaking or hearing Dutch, you're going to hear a lot of loan words from other languages just thrown in casually. If you like learning different languages, Dutch is really good because of that. And speaking of the vocabulary of Dutch itself, Dutch, the Dutch, Netherlands, was a colonial power. Indonesia. This is a big area, and South America, and well, it's where New York comes from. Brooklyn is a Dutch word. And so you had words from these different colonial regions that came into Dutch. There are a lot of Malay words in Dutch, words from Portuguese along the trade routes. And also the Spanish colonized and took over the Netherlands for a time. And so there are quite a few Spanish words in Dutch which are not quite the same in, say, German or Norwegian. And so Dutch is profoundly multicultural in this way, and that's really something that's beautiful about it. In terms of culture, the Dutch fought an 80-year-long guerrilla war for their independence against Spain, and this had a long-lasting impact upon their psychology as a people. In addition to that, they are a monarchy. So they have an exceptionalism about themselves. They want to preserve their privileges, and that's etched into their cultural fabric. After its independence from Spain, the Dutch culture and identity and the language underwent a renaissance of confidence. The Dutch Golden Age. You had paintings. Rembrandt, you might have heard of this guy, and other figures revolutionized art and imagery, which the English then took. They learned how to paint in many cases from the Dutch. And a lot of the words for shipping and boat and maritime related things come from the Dutch. And you'll notice, just looking at Dutch, there are a lot of single syllable words. And this is going to be really common between the Dutch, English, and the Scandinavian languages. The innovativeness of their culture, from windmills to canals, reclaiming land, has changed their language. They compound words like nobody's business, like other Germanic languages tend to do, as analytic languages tend to do. See my video on analytic languages if you want to learn more about analytic languages and how they work. But as for Dutch, here's just a simple few sentences so you can see it worked quite similar to English with a few minor exceptions. So a bit of Dutch grammar here, just really quickly to get you a basic idea of some basic forms. It is really similar to English. Look at this. The dog is on the carpet. De hond ligt op het tapijt. And there's 2 things I want to point out there. So you have ligt means to lie, and you have op, which on. But in Dutch, an object or what's doing it, what's on it, you have to say how that thing or person or animal fits into that space. Is it laying, standing, etc.? It's really different to English in that way. You say how the object is interacting with the space. The other thing is de hond is masculine, the de. But tapijt, the carpet, has het in front of it, which is the non-masculine gender. Let's show you another one here. Zit geen fles in de doos. A bottle is not in the box. And I want to show you this one because there's geen here. This is a negative. It means no. But there's 2 kinds of no in Dutch. So look at this one. De fles niet in de doos. So when it's the bottle, it changes to niet because it's definite. But just a bottle is geen. So there's 2 different forms of no, which is a different way of doing it to English, just so you know. I don't want to go into Afrikaans too much, it's not a focus here, but just to let you know that it exists and it's a very beautiful language, and especially if you don't like cold weather, but you want to get into the Germanic sphere of cultures and languages, Afrikaans is really great. It's spoken in South Africa and across Namibia, and sprinkled about in some other of the southern African countries to a lesser degree. It's got between 7 and 8 million speakers, and it's got a lot going for it in terms of what makes it unique. It's got words from African languages. It is mutually intelligible with Dutch. So if you speak Dutch or Afrikaans, you kind of get the other one for free, sort of. The Afrikaans identity is quite extraordinary. These people fought wars against the British. They fought to keep their culture alive. And you can see that in their rich literature. But what really makes Afrikaans so unique is this fusion of African with Germanic. Look at these words. Fundi means student in Afrikaans, and it comes from umfundi in Zulu. Someone who specializes on a subject or a student of a subject. Goga means insect in Afrikaans, and I don't know how to pronounce this right. It's from Xhosa, a clicking language. XOXO. I'm not going to try and pronounce that because there's clicking involved, but you get it. There's a lot of influence from these African languages in Afrikaans, but also you have words from the Malay language in Afrikaans. So that gives it a bit of flavor that's quite interesting to the language. Let's just look at a bit how it's quite unique in terms of grammar. It's very simplified. The infinite form and the present form of the verb are identical in Afrikaans. Here, have a look at this. Ek het geld verdiend means I have earned money. And it also means I earned money. The past tense has no difference with the past tense that's already happened in the past, like there is in English or Dutch. That's been completely erased. So you don't have to worry about trying to differentiate. It's quite easy. Look at this sentence in Afrikaans. Hy zal nie voel nie, and he sal rijk wees. Meaning, he will not stop and he will be rich. And there's this ni and ni on both sides of stop there, which means there's a double negative, which is really unique about Afrikaans because it's not found in any other West Germanic language. Let's look at one more just so you see how different this language is to Dutch, for example. Die meisje zien de zon. Don't quote my pronunciation there. What I want to show you here is the girl and the boy, the article in front of them, die, there's no difference between masculine and feminine there, like you would have with Dutch. In Dutch it would be het meisje ziet de jongen. So that's something that's unique about Afrikaans. You don't need to know which gender it is, you only have one article. German is the second most spoken Germanic language. I don't have to explain a lot about how much it has going for it in terms of culture, but we tend to think of it in terms of science and being exact in measurement and adhering to structure and the law. That's a bit stereotypical. These are people that have changed architecture, defined art, modern music through classical music. They're people who have given the world a lot of the humanities. Studying different languages through German has enriched, studies of, the Celtic languages. This is a major contributor in the world. If you want to learn this language, you have access to economics, art, science, several countries. It's not just spoken in Germany. You get Austria and Switzerland in the mix too, and Liechtenstein if you want to, have a bit of a tax haven. No offense. German identity is incredibly decentralized. And let me take a note sidestepping into history here. Germany was relatively late in forming as a nation. It had, at one point, hundreds of different principalities and kingdoms. And part of what happened in the 20th century, and part of what was so bad about it, is that the fascists tried to homogenize Germany, even its accents, and erase local identities. And so the Germany today is a lot less diverse in terms of German dialects and regionalisms than it once was, but it's still intensely localized, and accents will change from region to region with remarkable swiftness. And so you're not actually going into Germany learning one language. High German, which is in the south toward the mountains, and Low German, which is in the north toward the sea, are remarkably different in many cases. And now's a good time to talk about the High German consonantal shift. The High German consonantal shift is a phonological development, a sound change that took place in the southern parts of the West Germanic dialect continuum in several phases. It probably began between the 3rd and 5th centuries and was about complete before the earliest written records of High German in the 8th century. The resulting language, Old High German, can be neatly contrasted with the other continental West Germanic languages, which for the most part did not experience the shift, and with Old English, which remained completely unaffected. The High German consonant shift altered a number of consonants in the Southern German dialect, which explains why so many German words have different consonants from the related words in English, Dutch, and the Scandinavian languages. So just to get some of the big ones. Like take the word ship in English and ship in Dutch, that became Schiff with an F in German. The same sounds became affricates in other positions. That means, well, let me just show you what I mean. Apple in English, Appel in Dutch, but in German, Apfel. You also get voice stops became voiceless. So in Dutch you get deur and English door, and in Norwegian deur. But in German, Tur. There's that T there. German is just a different language to the others. It's got its own thing going on. Like every language, German is a gateway into other languages. So, because so many Dutch words are cognates or simply borrowed from German in many cases throughout their history, if you speak German, you're going to have a big foothold into Dutch already. Also, Polish, Lithuanian, Latvian, even Estonian to some degree. This was all areas that the German peoples were heavily active in over several centuries. If you have German, you're going to pick out many words in these languages much faster simply because of their shared cultural context that's changed words over time. And one thing that you do get with German is access into the Yiddish language. The German language has a case system. It doesn't work the way that you would in most other case-based languages with endings attaching on, though you get endings in German for different contexts. In German, you have pronouns and articles, which is a fancy way of saying the word the. And these two things change according to what's happening in the sentence. Now, I'm not going to go into all the different pronouns. I'll just put them here for you on the case system, how they change. But the articles are what most people find very difficult in German, or stereotypically being, oh, that's scary. So let's go through that really brief. So you get the standard articles, der, die, das, and you get the case endings, den, dem, des. And there are 4 cases. These 3 will take the other 3 and change them depending on which case it's in, usually the masculine form. Let me show you what I mean. Der Hund des Mannes. This literally means the man's dog. And the way the man owns that dog, that's a genitive form, showing possession. So man would normally be der, but because it's showing possession, you have that des there, and there's that es at the end of man, which changes as well. Another one. Die Frau dem Stuhl. The woman is on the stool. Now, one thing that's really peculiar before I go into anything else here, there's no is. That AUF conveys being on. But because of that dem form of de Stuhl, you know that that stool is being acted upon without having to expand upon it. And Frau with D is feminine. Now let's look at den. Here's the sentence. Nein. Sie ging mit den Jungs. No, she went with the boys. And if it was one boy, it would be dem. But that en denotes it's a plural form. So German is really concise in expressing things within sentences with smaller words, actually. And so this makes German really unique even within the German language family. But you can see some basic nuts and bolts of what I mean by its unique nature as a language. Hey, don't forget this is the first of this two-part bit on Germanic languages. So we'll see you in the next one to cover North Germanic languages in Scandinavia. Hey, thank you very much for watching. Next time.